The day the doctor told me I had cancer, I looked at my 3 children and thought we would face the battle together. I was wrong. My name is Margaret, and I am 68 years old. For over 40 years, my husband and I built a comfortable life through hard work and sacrifice. We owned a small family business and enough savings to live peacefully after retirement. When my husband passed away, I promised him I would always keep our family together. I believed our children loved each other as much as we loved them. My oldest son, Brian, had become a successful businessman. My younger son, Kevin, worked in real estate and lived a comfortable life. My youngest child, my daughter Sarah, chose a simple life as a nurse. She never cared about expensive cars or luxury vacations. She always said, "The greatest wealth is having the people you love beside you." At the time, I smiled at her words, never realizing how important they would become. A few weeks after my diagnosis, I began chemotherapy. The treatments were painful, exhausting, and left me too weak to do even the simplest things. At first, all 3 of my children promised they would support me. Brian said he would rearrange his business schedule. Kevin promised to visit every evening after work. Sarah quietly said, "Mom, you won't go through this alone." But as the weeks passed, promises slowly disappeared. Brian called more often than he visited, always saying another business meeting had come up. Kevin sent flowers and expensive gift baskets instead of spending time with me, explaining that work was keeping him busy. Only Sarah was there every single day. She drove me to every chemotherapy appointment, sat beside my hospital bed for hours, helped me eat when I was too weak to hold a spoon, and stayed awake through long nights whenever the pain became unbearable. She never once complained, even after working long shifts at the hospital. As I looked at my daughter gently holding my hand during another difficult treatment, I quietly realized something that broke my heart. When life became its hardest, the child with the least money had become the richest in love. Months passed, and my condition became more difficult. There were days when I could barely get out of bed without Sarah helping me. She never left my side. She cooked my meals, drove me to every hospital appointment, and even slept in the chair beside my bed whenever I was too sick to be alone. One evening after another exhausting chemotherapy session, I quietly apologized to her. "Sarah," I whispered, "I'm taking so much of your time. You're putting your whole life on hold because of me." She smiled, gently squeezed my hand, and replied, "Mom, when I was little, you stayed awake every night whenever I was sick. You never complained. Now it's my turn." Her words brought tears to my eyes. In that moment, I realized she wasn't helping me because she expected anything in return. She was simply returning the love I had given her throughout her childhood. Meanwhile, Brian and Kevin became even more distant. They continued sending expensive flowers, fruit baskets, and messages saying they were thinking of me, but weeks often passed. Without them walking through my front door, I didn't need gifts. I needed my children. One afternoon, after another hospital appointment, my family lawyer came to visit me at home. I had asked him to review my will because my illness had reminded me that tomorrow is never promised. As we sat together, he asked if I wanted to divide everything equally among my 3 children, just as my late husband and I had planned years earlier. Before I could answer, I looked through the living room window and saw Sarah outside helping me plant flowers because she knew gardening always made me smile. She had spent months caring for me without ever mentioning money, inheritance, or rewards. At that moment, I made the hardest decision of my life. I calmly looked at my lawyer and said, "I want my estate to reflect not who needed the money most, but who stood beside me when I needed love most." He nodded respectfully and prepared the new documents. I signed them with a trembling hand, not out of anger toward my sons, but because I wanted my final decision to honor compassion, loyalty, and unconditional love. I had no idea that after I was gone, my children would discover the truth and it would change their lives forever. A year later, my doctors gave me the news every cancer patient dreams of hearing. After months of chemotherapy, surgeries, and countless hospital visits, my cancer was finally in remission. I thanked God with tears in my eyes, but I also knew the illness had changed me forever. It had shown me who truly stood beside me when life became difficult. Sarah never left. She was there on the days I celebrated good test results, and on the nights I cried because I was afraid I would never see another birthday. Brian and Kevin visited more often after hearing I was recovering, but something had changed between us. They talked about family vacations, future plans, and even joked about selling my large house one day because it was too big for one person. I smiled politely, but deep inside I understood that while Sarah had been fighting for my life, my sons had already started thinking about my future possessions. I never argued with them. Instead, I quietly thanked God for giving me enough time to make the right decisions while I was still alive. Several months later, I invited all three of my children to a family dinner. They believed it was simply a celebration of my recovery. After dinner, I asked my lawyer to join us in the living room. Brian and Kevin looked confused as he placed a folder on the table. I calmly explained that I wanted my children to understand my wishes while I was still here rather than after I was gone. The lawyer opened the documents and explained that my estate, family home, business shares, and savings would be inherited, primarily by Sarah. Brian immediately stood up in shock. Kevin stared at me in disbelief. "Mom," Brian said, "this isn't fair. We've always been your children, too." I looked at both of them with tears in my eyes and quietly replied, "You are all my children, and I have always loved you equally. But when cancer took away my strength, only one of you gave me yours." Sarah never stayed because she expected an inheritance. She stayed because she couldn't imagine letting her mother fight alone. This decision is not about rewarding money. It is about honoring love, sacrifice, and the person who never left my side when I needed family the most. The room fell completely silent, and for the first time, my sons truly understood that the greatest inheritance in life is not wealth. It is the love we choose to give when no one is watching. Brian and Kevin left my house that evening angry and disappointed. For several weeks, neither of them called or visited. Sarah, however, never mentioned the inheritance. She continued stopping by after work, bringing groceries, and sitting beside me while we watched our favorite old movies. One afternoon, I asked her, "Sarah, are you surprised by what I decided?" She gently smiled and replied, "Mom, I never stayed because of money. If you gave everything away to charity tomorrow, I would still be here. You're my mother, and that's all that has ever mattered to me." Hearing those words filled my heart with peace. A few months later, Brian unexpectedly came to visit alone. He looked tired and emotional. As soon as he walked into the living room, he hugged me tightly and began to cry. "Mom," he whispered, "I spent so much time building my business that I forgot. The most important investment was my own family. I can't change the past, but I hope you'll give me a chance to be the son you deserved." Kevin also came to apologize. He admitted that he had convinced himself sending expensive gifts was enough, when what I truly needed was his presence. For the first time in many years, I saw genuine regret in both of my sons. Over the following years, our family slowly healed. Brian and Kevin began visiting every weekend, not because they expected anything, but because they genuinely wanted to spend time together. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and simple Sunday dinners around the same table again. Sarah welcomed her brothers with kindness and never reminded them of their mistakes. She simply smiled and said, "Mom always wanted us to stay together." Watching my three children laughing together again became the greatest reward of my life. When I looked back on my battle with cancer, I realized it had given me something I never expected. It showed me that true character is revealed during life's hardest moments, Money can buy flowers, gifts, and beautiful houses, but it cannot replace a comforting hand, a warm hug, or the quiet presence of someone who refuses to leave your side. Before I passed away many years later, I looked at all three of my children and said, "The greatest inheritance I leave you is not this house or my savings. It is the lesson that family should never be loved, only when it is convenient." Inherited my estate, just as I had planned. But my sons inherited something equally, valuably second chance to become better people. In the end, I left this world with peace in my heart because my family had finally learned that love, loyalty, and compassion are treasures far greater than any amount of money. Lesson: the greatest inheritance is not wealthy, is the love, time, and care we give to the people who need us most. Money can be divided, but kindness leaves a legacy that lasts forever.